Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Kill the Week. I am your host, Brandon, along with my partner and producer, Jill, sitting here with our forever intern, Carly, Chris, and Josh. And today's episode is brought to you by our good friend over here, Liam. So, Liam, why don't you tell us what kill you picked?
So for me, I'm a big sci-fi nerd. Grew up on like all the B sci-fi horror that I could get my hands on. So I had to pick the absolutely brutalistic classic of Robocop, specifically Emil the Melting Man. One of the best kills in the 80s for the genre. Wonderfully performed. A lot of really good backstory on the like production value of it. So yeah, I mean, it's a classic, all around, funny, terrifying, brutal, everything you want out of it.
What made you pick this kill specifically?
I think through watching some of the backlog of these episodes, I wanted to sort of deviate a little bit off the some of the horror path that had been set, because I think that especially with the ultra violent satirical nature of Robocop, it kind of lends itself to these like super awesome over the top kills that only movies of this caliber, and also Peter Verhoeven later on would do Starship Troopers as well as Showgirls. So really just kind of a master at the like over the top, well done kill.
Love it. I haven't seen Showgirls in a long time. I love that movie. All right, we're gonna go around the room, and starting with you, Liam, since you picked it and you kicked it off. When's the first time you watched Robocop?
So I probably saw Robocop for the first time at the age of like 13 or 14. Friday and Saturday nights with my dad was spent watching Sci-Fi Channel. So we would probably watch 2 to 5 movies a weekend, just hanging out on the couch. Was one of my dad's favorite movies. So I think by the time I had cleared like 13 ghosts and some of the other more disturbing, brutal movies, he was like, all right, you can hang well enough. You can watch Robocop, I guess.
Robocop does kind of stump 13 Ghosts in the gore factor.
Yeah, it's certainly much further along, but once you like hit that age where you can kind of like get satire to a better degree, that movie just really like takes off for you, and you get to experience it in the ways that it is incredibly funny, but also a horrifyingly brutal depiction of the future of policing and unfortunately things that have come to pass in our current present. So it was super influential. I love sci-fi movies, probably more than I love horror movies. I'm a big sci-fi nerd, so this sort of has a nice marriage. Some of the research I found going into this as well, which makes sense, is the writer for the script worked on Blade Runner. So you kind of get that same like dystopian futuristic feel from the movie.
Yeah. Josh, how about you? When's the first time you watched Robocop?
I saw it when I was at like 9, because my dad introduced us to Terminator first. So that's where my love of sci-fi and /hate of robots come from.
Speaking of Terminator, did anyone play the Sega Genesis game Terminator versus Robocop?
I played that.
I did not, but I wanted to.
It's a good time.
I was extremely frustrated by how slowly Robocop moved in that game.
He moved at the pace he did in the movie. It was a little too accurate.
Right, yeah, and it was just too difficult. Like, I feel like this guy's like, why the hell aren't you running at the orgs that are trying to like kill you? And he's just like, So yeah, won the game pretty quickly.
Okay, on that, Chris, when's the first time you watched RoboCop?
I mean, I must have watched it in bits and pieces. I remember when I was a kid, my parents always being like, "Oh, that's a stupid movie. You're a can't watch it." But I think the first time I really fully actually watched the movie was in college with my friends, being like, "No, this movie's incredible, and it's not stupid, and I watched it, and I was blown away by it. Like I've always been a big fan of like Verhoeven stuff. Like I love Starship Troopers. I thought that was an incredible movie, and I really learned to appreciate it later. RoboCop later on once I watched it all the way through for the first time in college.
For me, I think I was like around maybe 10 when I first saw it, but I didn't know it was a movie. Like my dad got me a RoboCop toy because the marketing for RoboCop was like insane back in the day. Because rated R violent and gore movies spawned 3 other sequels and a cartoon for children. So like my dad saw the toy and he got me the toy, and I think it was more for him that he just like saw it and wanted to buy it. So he got that and he gave it to me, and I had no idea what it was. And I remember specifically there was a button on his chest that made his visor light up red, which was really cool. And then my dad was like, "Oh yeah, it came from a movie. We're gonna watch the movie now." And I just remember being young, watching it, and just like freaking out, not really understanding anything because I was so young. I was like, "Oh, cool, he's a robot man, and he's just shooting people, guns and violence. That's all I want." And then the giant robot in the beginning that just took out the fucking board supervisor was great. How about you? When was the first time you watched it?
I don't remember when I first watched it. It's just one of those things that always existed growing up. Like my dad watched all these types of movies, and it was probably one of those I walked into the room and sat down and was like, "All right, we're watching this," and did not understand what was happening, and it just exists somewhere in my memory, but it's always been there in some inappropriate way.
That's fair. And Carly, this was your first time watching.
Watched it an hour ago.
Good, so it's fresh. You can
It's
lead
so
the
fresh.
entire conversation.
Okay, let's not get too overzealous now.
What did you think?
I actually thought it was really good. Actually watched it right after I watched How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. So they were going to be on an 80s and 90s movie kick for a little while now.
All right.
Yeah, it was really good.
How would you compare the two?
Well, actually, I read the script for How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days before it was for an assignment for class. But I read the script and then I had to watch the movie. And the script for that movie was so sexist. Thank God they changed it because oh my God. But I would say, well, one's rom-com and one's sci-fi. I will say, I was picking up on a lot of sexual tension in the other movie.
Oh, yes, you
In Robocop.
off camera, you talked a little bit about the shower.
No, not the
Then-
Wasn't there? Wasn't
Bathroom.
Wasn't there in the bathroom?
In the
They were
bathroom.
They were that. What was it? The executive lounge. I really thought they were gonna kiss. I really thought they were gonna kiss, and I really wanted them to, but they didn't. I was sad.
Well, I'm glad that you were rooting.
I was rude.
You were rooting so fucking hard. Okay, going into the kills specifically, was thank you to Liam for providing notes for us because I didn't do my homework as I normally do. Thing that I learned, I didn't realize that Rob Bottin was the special effects coordinator on this.
Yeah.
And Rob Bottin is a fucking legend when it comes to anything practical effects and stuff like that. As you did the thing, he did the Thing, the Fog, Legend, and stuff like that, which is absolutely amazing. He worked on stuff. I believe he worked on a lot of modern day movies like Hatchet and things like that as well, which he was kind of part of that, like along the lines of Tom Savini and Greg Nicotero, the K&B effects guys, where they were like huge in the 80s, making everything completely outlandish and realistic and just fun. And that's what made this kill for me specifically a lot of fun, was that droopy gore effect. Because I remember like watching this as a kid and then later in life discovering the Toxic Avenger and thinking that it was like on the same lines of like, when you think melting toxic waste, like there's only one vision. For me, it's Toxic Avenger now, but this movie kind of kickstarted that idea. And I don't really know, Carly, you might not know because you're so young and youthful. The show Action League Now, if anyone remembers that show from Nickelodeon. It was like the little
I
toys.
think you just broke Josh.
But
Memory unlocked. Memory unlocked.
yeah, it was, Meltman, the incredible ability to melt. That's what I thought about rewatching this.
So the direct movie that Rob worked on before this was The Incredible Melting Man, which is Pretty charming. It's a very straightforward. It's kind of a precursor, like to the Blob, which I have some notes in there because the guy that plays Emil is also in the Blob and has a pretty awesome death scene in that movie as well. So Rob, right before this production, worked on The Incredible Melting Man on the special effects team, and he brought a lot of that with him. A lot of that, like, so with you talking about like the melting and the degradation, some of the notes that were on this kill were that they actually had stages of decomposition that they added on through each shot that they did with him. So like you get this sense that he's actively melting, and like it's going further and further every second that he's progressing through this before the kill happens. So he had a multi-stage resin costume that they were adding layers on and layers as they kept shooting the scene. So it gives that like that look. Obviously, when they do the car strike, it's a body double that they use a few times in the movies. Beautifully happy accident that the head just kind of like rolls up the windshield. And then beyond that, there's notes that they were saving soup and other food items from Crafty to make the bile that like shoots across the windshield. So they got really creative. Rob was part of the makeup team for the thing, so he's obviously doing a lot of those effects. This was one of his first chances to be a full production designer, and he really like took everything he learned from those other sets and applied it in such a fantastic fashion. Can't believe how much money they probably spent on squibs in that movie, because there's a few squibs that pop on and off.
Ignore that. Yeah, was this before the thing or after the thing?
So this is after the thing. Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was 82, I think, and this is 87.
Okay.
I think those were the years that I had saw and put in the notes. But yeah, so he had worked on it prior. There is, and I unfortunately get a chance to watch it. There is a documentary about the making of RoboCop.
Yeah.
And I know he's a part of that. Does some commentary as well on a lot of the production.
Yeah, apparently the behind the scenes of RoboCop was like incredibly intense. I haven't watched the documentary, but I've heard a lot about it. And who plays Murphy? Is it Paul?
He's in, his name is in there towards the last section there of the
Towards the last
top.
section.
So I thought I put it in there.
I can just look it up real quick because I'm blanking on who played RoboCop. I think it's like Paul something. Paul Weller or Peter Weller, not Paul. Peter Weller. Apparently he had such like a rough time making this movie, especially because the suit that they put him in was actually like what, like a not
So they
it
had
was like heavy as
they
fuck.
had notes that I read had 7 different suits throughout the movie, because there's a few scenes where he's got some battle scars and stuff, but they said the range was 25 pounds to 70 pounds for the costume. They actually had to have someone come in and sort of teach him how to walk with the suit, which is why you kind of get the really classic stiff looking walk. It's because it was heavy and he had to sort of like make sure it didn't fall apart on top of him as well. Shot partly in LA, but so the warehouse scene that the kill leads into was actually shot in Pennsylvania.
It was in Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
But apparently throughout the entire set, the like temperatures were insane, and he was just cooking in that suit the whole time. Verhoeven as well, wonderful director. Apparently not the best on set as well. Pretty aggressive directing style, and pretty legendary for some of his verbal meltdowns at crew.
Oh, RoboDoc is the name of the documentary that is out there, and apparently Peter Weller was the last person to join that cast because he did not want to talk about his experiences through RoboCop. But I don't think it stopped him from being in all the sequels and everything else after that. So when you have a franchise, and you want to ride that shit out as much as fucking possible. In every word. So for all of us who have seen the movie previously, again, I want to go around the room starting with Liam. what, like, revisiting the movie, revisiting the kill, like, what, like, did it bring you back to being a kid, or did it like refuel you in a different way now being more of like a filmmaker and everything like that, which we didn't talk about? We should have talked about that. You are a filmmaker. That did it kind of like rejuvenate like creativity to you? Like how did it feel like going back to it?
I mean, for sure. You know, I sort of had the advantage of growing up with a lot of these movies because my dad's interest in them. So I, you know, just absolutely love practical effects. To me, it just made everything that much more fantastic, better, you know, appears better on screen. And I think, in all honesty, the movie holds up like, fantastically. Both in like the concept and scope of the movie, but also the practical effects. It is just as like brutal and gut wrenching rewatching it, you know, as an adult and like even knowing what to expect versus like having that initial shock value of watching it the first time as a kid. I mean, the movie starts out with it. I mean, as you said, the corpo getting absolutely mulched by the robot in front of everybody to Murphy as a human cop getting murdered. Like it's like really crushing, brutal stuff, and like they held no punches with it. Apparently, there's a lot of deleted scenes that didn't make it because it pushed it past R for the rating board. So there's definitely, yeah, there was an edge to the movie, and while it comes across fairly funny, I think that's like the way they wanted you to react to it because it is just so over the top. But yeah, I mean, fantastic inspiration. You know, it was shot on relatively low budget, 11 million, which you know is fairly indie by these days. So really great testament to like what a good script and a team that's like passionate about the project and bring it to and bring it to the level that it did.
How about you? What was it like revisiting this kill specifically and movie?
Me?
Yeah.
I did. So for me, it did bring me back to being a kid because I remember that scene, and I know I'm not the only one, but when he comes out of the acid, he sounds like a werewolf. And as a kid, I was like, no way. And that kind of like broke the whole genre for me for like a split second. And I'll never forget that because, well, he didn't turn to werewolf, obviously, but I kind of always wanted that.
We wanted a monster movie at the end of it.
I wanted it all.
How about you, Chris?
Oh, Chris, you got low battery there, bud.
Yeah, I know. I'm just gonna let it run out. I got another one queued up here, but yeah, no, for me, because I never really started watching the movie completely through until college. I think most of the times that I did screen it, I was pretty drunk, and towards the end, like I would just like by that point in the movie, there was so much going on. And it just got so ridiculous by that point. I didn't really remember that particular. Well, I remembered that particular kill, but I think the kill for me that really like got my attention was this when the robot attacked the guy in the boardroom. That's the one that really I remembered. But I think this final kill is really just like the icing on the top of the cake. I mean. No matter how much you drink and no matter what's going on around you at the time, you remember when this guy's just head rolls up that windshield and everything just gets splattered with goo. You know, I think that was what really became one of the most memorable parts for me of the franchise in general.
I think in my case, like revisiting it, it was one of those because like I haven't watched this movie probably since I was a teenager, and revisiting it again, I completely forgot this was in the movie because when you look at it, it looks like it would be from something else. Like it doesn't, to me, it didn't fit the world of Robocop, but it made sense as to why with where they were and Robocop shooting the dude ahead of time for him to crash into the toxic waste thing. Like, it feels like it could have been lifted from a movie like going back to like The Blob or The Stuff or something like along those lines of those like 80s like gore movies and things like that. But like it was so different of a thing that it does kind of sit in your brain, and it's like, oh god, like you remember that movie when that dude was melting and got hit by a car? Like, what movie was that? And you say it's Robocop, no one will believe you because you expect Robocop to kill everyone rather than getting hit by Red Foreman in a car and exploding on impact, which was great. But I think
that's the thing about this kill. It's like it's completely gratuitous. Like that, it has no like logical like place in the movie other than let's just cover this dude that we've been hating up until this point with toxic waste. He mutates and then he explodes in goo. It really pushes the envelope as to how contextual, like what is the point of portraying this death? Like how does this pertain to anything?
Very. What did you think seeing it?
I mean, I don't remember it when I was a kid because I just remember some bits and pieces, but watching the kill reminds me of probably why my dad would have loved the movie and why he was watching it. So it was very comfortable to watch. I was like, yep, this is why he was watching this movie. Because I don't remember much of Robocop until I rewatched it for this. It was very much like Twin Peaks Reunion and Toxic Avenger in my brain. So that's where my head was the whole time for that kill. But yeah, I see why my dad loved it.
Carly?
I'm not gonna lie, it actually like petrified me. I'm a really big hypochondriac.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. And so I just like put myself in his mindset of like, I'm melting, I'm gonna die. And I'm like, oh my god, when he got killed, I was so relieved. I was so relieved for him. And him like going after the guy, he's like, don't touch me. And I'm like, oh my god, I feel so bad for you. It made me so sad and so horrified.
That's the other thing too. He goes up to Ray Wise and like, help me. And for that split second, Ray Wise steals the entire fucking show between his facial expressions and just his mannerisms to watch him just freak the fuck out as soon as he touched him.
That was that Twin Peaks coming.
Yeah, it was the Twin Peaks coming.
Twin Peaks coming. I love them.
I feel like all those guys were just like really overcasted. Like they were all just kind of like hired goons, and they were all like really professional actors who were capable of like such range, and you could see it in like other stuff that they were in. And this dude was like, he was scum. Like that was his character. He was just a scum guy who liked big guns, and he becomes scum in the end. It's freaking beautiful, amazing.
Yeah. And it's loaded with some of the best fucking one-liners that you can ever imagine. And obviously the big one that I still quote to this day is "bitches leave." The hands down the greatest line in the fucking movie.
Early on, there's a guy robbing a beer store, and when Robocop shows up, he's just screaming like "fuck me," just like over and over again. Like they really just like. For me, growing up in North Jersey, like it just feels like Jersey City. Like everything about the movie reads like Jersey City to me. Yeah, I mean it's set in Chicago. Set in a futuristic Chicago from
Detroit.
The time.
You guys in Detroit.
Detroit or Chicago.
Detroit.
One of the two.
I watched it today. It's Detroit.
So yeah, the west side of Detroit. And yeah, they just they somehow managed to capture like this universe that they built and all these little snippets of scenes really well. I think that the choice to like have him get melted, Emil, wasn't like a random thing. I think there's like a big element about sort of like the industrialized world and how that sort of crushes people underfoot. So I think the fact that the whole scene, aside from like, needing all the space for pyrotechnics and stunts and stuff, they choose like a rundown industrial zone that's like, incredibly hazardous. They're doing a car chase and a shootout in it, but you get the sense that the world that they live in is just brutal at every extent. So I think a lot of moments in the movie really kind of capture and build upon that environment for the movie.
I think like when the scene where like all the cops are going on strike, it kind of reminded me a lot of like Gotham City, in my opinion. Like when like
I can see that. Yeah. Definitely hit that point. Like, I don't know, watching them in the police station in the beginning of like, you know, the fight going on and this and that, like the way my brain works is like you always compare it to like other things that you've seen, and like watching the guy like fight off all the cops, and the woman's like the one that his partner's the one that take him out, and they're just like fighting all these people. For some reason my brain went to fucking if anyone's seen the movie Don't Be a Menace. Anyone ever seen that movie? My brain went to like when they got arrested for being black on a Friday night, and they're in the police station, and all the cops are huddled around the arcade machine. And
That's exactly what you're talking about.
you know what I'm talking about?
That's accurate. That is accurate.
That was the scene that popped into my head when I'm watching the beginning of this movie, and like how they're all acting.
Well, I might make that for you.
Me and Josh got it. It's fine. We're on the
You know what? That's my movie now. Forgive me for Vendetta. Watch it.
Don't Be a Menace now.
Yep.
Movie's fantastic. Whether the police station, looking at it now, it seems like that's where they got the inspiration from. Was Robocop for that scene, because it was so gritty, it was so dark, and like for him, even this phase, like, you know, we don't go on strike. We're police officers. Like he's holding it as such like a badge of honor when everyone there is just so fucking over it in the police station, which I thought was like really cool and sadly a reflection of present day.
Yeah, the movie kind of stands out as a like instant classic. It really drew upon the times. I mean, obviously you have a crew of directors and special effects teams that made some of the best cult movies of that era. So it was sort of this perfect storm. As it was mentioned before, the casting really like elevates the movie. Every performance is just like at that point of 11, and it fits for the movie. The pace is very good throughout it as well. It's really driven by the dialogue and these like flashes of like extreme violence that it just does so well.
Oh yeah, which is funny because it was turned into a cartoon.
Gotta hustle with Inspector Gadget for the children demographic.
True, yeah. So when we went to go back and rewatch it, I was trying to find what it was like streaming on, because unfortunately I don't own it. I should own it at this point, but I don't own Robocop. And I was like, oh, cool, it's playing on like this app or whatever. And I put it on, and I'm watching. And I was like, this isn't Robocop. Like something is really off about it. There's apparently like a PG version of Robocop that came out, and like we're watching it, and it was just like it started with the news broadcast, just like
very Back to the Future vibe.
Yeah. And like it looked like it was transferred from VHS onto this platform, and they're talking about how like, oh, this car is like, you know, it runs on manure, and there's plenty of manure around everywhere. I was like, when the fuck did this happen in the movie? And it starts off with this like weird hostage situation, and it's like, oh, the guy in there, like he wants Robocop. I'm like, Robocop doesn't exist in the first 10 minutes of this movie. What the fuck is going on? There's a PG version of Robocop out there.
Kids Bop Robocop.
What is it?
Kids Bop for Robocop.
Yeah, exactly.
That's wild.
It was so weird.
Is that a movie or is it like a cartoon?
No, it was a live action thing. It was on the streaming platform Fossum. And
did it have a production year for it?
Was it like some sort of like Soviet Union like ripoff or something?
No, it was all in English. But I was so taken back by it. Like I'm watching, I was like, this isn't the RoboCop that I remember. Excuse me. Yeah, so it was a TV. I think it was the show. Okay, it was the series. It was the TV series for it. So it was like the live action TV series, but for some reason it was an hour and 29 minutes and not broken up like episodically for what it was. So this was from 94. for the RoboCop series.
So they made like an hour and 90.
I'm guessing the pilot was an hour and a half for RoboCop the TV series.
It didn't have multiple seasons, did it?
No, just one.
Okay.
Thank God. But yeah, like we're watching it, I'm just like, this isn't RoboCop. Like something's not right. It's like he wants RoboCop. Like they made it such like a huge impact that RoboCop was going to come in and diffuse the hostage situation. It's terrible.
It doesn't seem like something RoboCop was very good at doing. You know, he doesn't seem like a hostage negotiator. You know, he just seems like his negotiating style is shoot the
Violence.
guy in the dick. You know,
Shoot the guy in the dick.
so under certain circumstances, but you know, was that like it was like, you know, like maybe they developed RoboCop technology in the like the several years between 1987 and 1994, so that he could more properly negotiate.
There was like a stream in Philly of these like wheat pastes going around the city that was literally said, "Remember that time RoboCop shot that dude in the dick?" And there was like a huge wheat paste at Tattooed Moms, like just on the wall was like RoboCop's face, and it was like, "Remember that time RoboCop shot that dude in the dick?" And someone made a short film, which I have to find, when it was literally like that scene when he shoots the dude in the dick, and they went in and remade that scene and just had like a shit ton of people running, and all they were doing was getting shot in the dick, and it's just shots of RoboCop shooting these dudes.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastically done. It's a horde of pedophiles, or it's rapists. One of the two are just like running at him, and yeah, there's a lot of prosthetic dick blowing off. It's pretty much everything you would want out of it.
Yeah, it's definitely
That was like a collaboration, right? Like everybody, like a bunch of different like filmmakers on like YouTube and stuff, like they all got one scene that they did to remake for like a collaboration of RoboCop, and the guy getting shot in the dick scene was done. This is the most memorable one.
Is that what it was? It was like a bunch of people getting together to do that?
Yeah, it was like everybody got like had to remake one scene in their own image, and that was what they did for that scene.
Speaking of the legacy, though, I mean, more recently, the latest thing was there was a video game, like a pretty fairly high budget video game for RoboCop, which, like, I think in a very mixed media world that we live in now, it might mean, you know, we'll see some kind of movie adaptation again. For me, it's really tough to capture all of those, especially the way we've leaned more on CGI and different techniques for special effects. We won't get the same sort of caliber that we came to love from RoboCop. But it's cool to see that it's still taking on life, and it's still, you know, an inspiration for people.
Yeah. Has anyone seen the remake that came out like a couple years ago?
I'm so terrified of sci-fi remakes. I think the only one that I think it's worth a shot. The Total Recall and the Judge Dredd reboots were both pretty solid. So I think in that wheelhouse, there's some reverence for the old sci-fi movies. So it's probably decent, but got everything I want out of the original.
Fair. It looked good. I liked his design in the remake, but I didn't bother to watch it.
I've only heard bad things.
Really?
I've seen it, and in my opinion, it completely missed the mark. Like every aspect of the satire and absurdity of the original, that was just, they tried to make it into something that was more accessible to people who don't or aren't looking for something with like a mixed message. And it was just like kind of like a bland action movie. I mean, it was competently done, but it wasn't interesting. It didn't really, the message was lost, you know. In the remake.
Some interesting notes from Verhoeven on the movie. So he actually turned down directing the movie twice before he signed on. Apparently he read the initial script and he didn't get it. Like he just thought it was a bad action movie. And it wasn't until his wife had screened the script for him where she's like, no, this is actually incredible. The like layers of satire here are like incredibly well done and thoughtful. And a lot of the kills in the movie, Verhoeven was actually going more for comedic edge than anything. He wanted people to laugh at like the absurdity of the scenes. And I definitely, you know, our reaction to rewatching it was like laughing because it's goofy, but like, you know, I could imagine for the time it's probably pretty shocking because it is a level of like modern ultra violence that like, you know, it wasn't a monster, it wasn't like supernatural. This was like gritty, realistic kind of brutality.
Sure. I think that's something that also gets like overlooked a lot in like just in any movie, like people reflecting back on like older films, that they're not taking the time to think about like what impact it had at that time. Like no one's seen bodies being exploded and be liquefying upon contact in movies at that time, or at least not to that extent on a mainstream market, because like Robocop was pretty mainstream at the time. And like you would see it in films like trauma films and stuff like that. You would see things that are up to that absurdity, but you wouldn't have it on the big screen that people were paying money to go to like a regular movie theater to see. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right in terms of like the shock value of like this motherfucker just turned into just liquefied stuff in his head rolled up a windshield. You didn't get that normally on a mainstream market of stuff. Even in like the biggest horror movies at the time, it's like, yeah, you had Jason Voorhees hacking people up with a machete, and like some of the kills that he did or things that Freddy did that were like very absurd, but the rules were different. Like Robocop being set in like a weird dystopian future was still grounded in some form of reality versus like again, Freddy and Nightmare on Elm Street being in like a dream world scenario where anything can happen. So the rules were different. So when you apply a realistic layer onto it, it can kind of like fuck up the psyche a little bit.
One of the things that like strikes me, and like I mostly studied cinematography, so like on top of like the special effects, I really tried to like look at the way that they shot a lot of the violence in the movie, and the casual nature in which they approach the violence. Like if we refer to that first kill in the conference room, like there's some tension build up to it, but like it is an incredibly brightly lit space, and then like you go from, you know, sort of these reversing one shots of the ED robot and the guy who gets killed. And, you know, they just kind of pull the switch. There's not that like second of breath before. I mean, like you even get the countdown to it and then it just happens. And like the movie really does a good job of like making this ultra violence casual in the way that it's sort of portrayed. And it's like instantaneous. It doesn't really hold punches. And I definitely think for that time, that would have been something that's like fairly shocking to, you know, experience, and to you know, at the end of the day, he is a cop, and like he's fucking murdering, you know, people in just brutal ways.
I also think they did a really good job at blending. I don't remember if we said this before or not. The blending of mixed medias. Going back to the conference room scene, the combination of stop motion animation and practical that they did with it, and the idea with like the melting side of like I didn't realize that they would add layers and layers upon to the effects of the guy's thing, but like it was really impactful of how much more that they did to show the decomposition of a human, but the blending of multimedia that they did with this, and even looking at the practical effects of like Peter Weller's headpiece, of how they were able to blend in like however the helmet was. I needed to know how they crafted him in general of the flesh into fucking gear at that point, because it is absolutely amazing. It's stunning to watch.
It really looks like his skin was like stretched over some sort of like metallic skeleton. You know what I mean?
Oh,
very melting of Terminator 2, almost, but stretchier, like I said.
It was pretty strange. His face was kind of like pulled back really heavily in that fucking helmet. very uncomfortable.
He really had a facelift. Really good facelift.
You're saving that, aren't you?
Yeah.
Boy. Do you have any other notes about RoboCop?
We've covered a lot of the basis. I mean, the kill's wonderful for just a myriad of reasons. You know, like we touched upon, like Peter Verhoeven does Starship Troopers, which is another like absolutely fantastic sort of gory, realistic satire. You know, I like to think that a lot of that was what he learned from RoboCop, with storytelling in particular. So it's cool to kind of see that evolution. Same with, you know, we talked about Rob Bottin and all the stuff that he worked on. So it's really cool to see this like wonderfully gory, brutal scene is sort of this culmination of all of this like learned work, and then what comes after. It's kind of this wonderful dot on the map for the genre and for like practical effects as well.
Oh yeah. Cool. So with that, let's go around and do like final thoughts on everything. I'm gonna end on you. So I'm gonna start with Josh. Josh, what is your final thoughts on this kill and RoboCop as a whole?
So the kill is still something that, to me, for a split second, I thought was about to be a monster sci-fi and horror genre all ripped in one. It wasn't, but the movie overall still set the precedent, because I am also a sci-fi person. Over, like, is my favorite genre. So it was in there. I still want to fight the robots though.
Chris, what about you?
I think this particular kill, it's as it's at like the climax of the movie, it seems like Verhoeven was trying to give us something that was like, here's just something that lets the audience know that he really appreciates them. Here's something extra special just for them, just because he could. You know, it has nothing to do with anything else. And it's actually very wholesome. In a weird way, it's a very wholesome killing. Maybe the most wholesome one I've seen.
It was a mercy killing for sure.
Yeah.
By accident.
By accident. What about you?
I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, I love the movie. I see why people love it and why it's withstood the test of time. It's every time you think that like the kill is over, it just keeps getting worse until it becomes this like gory car wash effect of body gore, and then it's horrendous and it's memorable. And I haven't seen anything like it, but I see where other films have been influenced by it. Yeah.
Carly?
Horrified, petrified. Keep me away from any industrial complex ever. Will not take part.
Good, and I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad. No, seriously, like I'm glad to hear that. Like an older film can still have that impact on someone that is younger, that grew up in a more like CGI realm of movies and stuff like that. That something that is practical to that effect can still hit on a nerve. So like that kind of makes me happy and hopeful for practical effects in the future. That because you're 21, right? So you're younger, obviously, and you didn't grow up watching a lot of these types of films that are very like 80s centric, where they relied more on practical effects.
Yeah.
So it's nice to hear like someone who hasn't experienced that as much can see it and basically get the reaction that the people did in the past for them first hearing it. So like that kind of makes me hopeful for it. For me, this kill in particular, like it definitely holds on strong. It's still one of those things where it's like, I still will never remember that it's from RoboCop. I'll think it's from something else because it is very different and is one of the things that it was a catalyst to RoboCop doing it, but it wasn't the final kill of RoboCop. But I will always love the fact that Red Foreman was the one to do it. And that makes me happy in every sense of the word. I think it's something that is just lives rent free in my brain of the God help me scene, and Ray Wise just freaked out. I just wanted to hear him scream "dance with me" so he can dance with the fucking guy. But I fucking love it. I think it's great. I love the idea of just splatter. The only thing that I wish would have happened, that just out of instinct, the windshield wiper would have came on. That's all that I wanted. I wanted the windshield wiper to fucking brush away some of that shit. Maybe he wouldn't have hit that cliff and flipped over. So Liam, we're to end on you.
Stay the fuck out of Pittsburgh. That's sort of the moral here. I mean, like we talked about the practical effects, and we talked about the lead up and some of the cinematography techniques, but really the performance is what kind of cements this for me. They did a great job of the sound design. His performance and shrieking and wailing is just like, that sound lives in my head, rent free. And they sort of like kind of dot the sound throughout the scene as they transition to the car chase and stuff. So like, it just sets it up so well. And, getting some of that background information about the production style and the techniques they applied, like, you can put so much thought into these things to really craft these like memorable moments that we're talking about, 30 plus years later.
I think for me, the thing that sticks with me is his fucking fingers. Like the droopy fucking finger is what just...
Imagine looking down at that. Like, I can't even. I'm so uncomfortable.
But they designed it well because the acid would have like gone down his throat, so that's why you get that kind of wheezing, like, screeching sound. Is because his vocal cords are silly putty at that point. So, so much thought went into it. A perfect storm of talent, both on cast and crew, and couldn't have been anything else for me to pick for this.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Liam. Thank you, Josh, Chris, Carly, Jill, everybody, for being a part of this. Unfortunately, our other cohort just couldn't make it tonight, and we miss her dearly. But thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next week with another episode of the Week.